The U.S. House of Representatives passed pro-Taiwan legislation. A think tank leader in the U.S. was arrested for being a CCP agent, and China and Russia continue to participate in joint military drills. That and more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell, and this episode is sponsored by Incogni. You probably know that companies are collecting your personal data, but you may not realize just how many. Dozens, maybe hundreds, most of which you've never heard of, and you have no idea what they're doing with it. Incogni helps stop them. I'll explain more at the end. Chinese travelers are taking more last-minute trips as the Chinese economy gasps for air. According to the president and CEO of Marriott International, more Chinese consumers are booking hotels as late as 3 days in advance, the lowest level ever seen, and much shorter than the nearly 20-day booking window for consumers in the rest of the world. Generally, that kind of last-minute trip planning shows that spenders are trying to take advantage of last-minute deals and spend cautiously, which makes a lot of sense given the state of China's economy. The head of a U.S. think tank has been arrested on charges of being an agent of the CCP. What were they think-tanking? Gail Luft, a dual U.S.-Israeli citizen, is the co-director of the Institute for the Analysis of Global Security, a think tank based in Washington, D.C. that focuses on energy, security, and economic trends. He was previously arrested last February in Cyprus and later charged with spying and arms dealing. So it seems like Think allegedly wasn't the only tank business he was in. But he fled while he was released on bail, insisting that the charges were politically motivated because he was a Hunter Biden whistleblower. His think tank stated it was confident in his innocence shortly afterwards. This time, neither he nor the think tank have commented on the arrest. Prosecutors have said he will be extradited to the United States in the coming weeks or months, but no one said where he was arrested. Once he's extradited, he'll appear in Manhattan federal court and be asked to enter a plea. This is, of course, shortly on the heels of revelations that a Chinese agent went undetected in the New York state government for years. Washington's Indo-Pacific commander condemned the CCP in first-ever talks with his Chinese counterpart. Admiral Samuel Papero held these talks via teleconference video on Monday with General Wu Yanan. A readout of the call said the two had a constructive and respectful exchange of views. However, it also said that Papero urged Wu to reconsider the use of dangerous, coercive, and potentially escalatory tactics in the South China Sea and beyond. Papero also reminded Wu that China has an obligation to comply with international laws and norms to ensure operational safety. This is largely about repeated clashes between China and Washington's treaty ally, the Philippines, over the past few months and years in the South China Sea, which China claims almost entirely as its own. So the CCP has resorted to increasingly violent measures to intimidate the Philippines, which could potentially drag the U.S. military in if things get too rough. And it's not just about the Philippines. Last October, the Pentagon released declassified images and videos showing 15 recent cases of what it called coercive and risky behavior by the Chinese military against American military aircraft in international airspace over China's nearby waters, including the South China Sea. But Papero still emphasized the importance of sustained lines of communication between China and the U.S. to reduce the risk of miscalculation or escalation. Yeah, somehow that's always the ultimate message. We gotta keep these constructive and respectful exchanges that won't amount to anything coming. On Monday, the U.S. House passed the Taiwan Conflict Deterrence Act. This is aimed at deterring Chinese aggression around Taiwan by threatening to publish information about CCP officials' illicit financial assets should it invade the island, which is a great idea. The CCP loves to propagandize the Chinese people with stories about how corrupt and evil the Americans are. But if the U.S. starts exposing how deep corruption goes in the Communist Party, Chinese people may just get a little upset. The bill would also restrict financial services from certain immediate family of such officials, according to the text. But the bill would also take these punitive actions toward CCP officials and their family members, even if China just blockaded Taiwan rather than a full-scale attack. The bipartisan bill was introduced in January 2023 and passed unanimously after just a few remarks from other House members. Yes, China is such a threat it brought U.S. Republicans and Democrats together unanimously. The last time the U.S. was this united against a hostile foreign threat was the aliens in Independence Day. Taiwan's Minister of Foreign Affairs expressed gratitude to the U.S. Congress for this creative and effective way to deter China, saying that this kind of legislation allows us to jointly deter Chinese communist expansion and to uphold peace in the Indo-Pacific region, especially cross-strait security and stability. And as an American, it's nice to see us so united. I'm sure there's nothing that could keep us from remaining so united, especially between now and November. And after the break, China and Russia are holding another joint military drill. Welcome back. Despite Australia's best efforts to warm relations, China has maintained its ban on Australian live lobster imports. This is obviously very frustrating for Australia's rock lobster fishermen. It's especially frustrating since Australia has been trying so hard to woo the CCP. You see, late in 2020, China banned the import of live rock lobsters from Australia, claiming they were dangerous due to excessive levels of heavy metals. Yes, because China is so well known for food safety. But according to the Australian Broadcasting Channel, the real reason was a wide-ranging campaign of trade coercion against the Morrison government, which was in power at the time. The CCP has lifted most of those trade barriers since the new government, led by Anthony Albanese, has sought to pursue stabilization with China. You know, stabilization. However, this particular ban remains, even though the Australian Trade Minister said back in June that he was very confident the issue would be resolved very quickly. Large quantities of these lobsters are still making their way into China through gray channels, meaning largely through Hong Kong ports. But the industry remains under financial strain. There are multiple possible reasons the ban is still in place, from attempts to squeeze concessions out of the Albanese government to simple bureaucratic delays. The Australian government has pledged to continue discussions with CCP officials about lifting the ban, and the issue will loom over the ACBC, Australia-China Business Council meeting later this week in Canberra, where rock lobster will actually be served as a dish, which is about as subtle as the next round of US-China talks, including a cake with a picture of China spraying down a Filipino boat with a big X printed over it. In totally unrelated news, it looks like Chinese-made electric vehicles might soon be a more common sight on Australian roads. BYD, a Chinese automaker, has signed a deal with Uber, offering cut-price vehicles and accessible financing, plus cheap EV running costs. BYD recently toppled Tesla as the world's leading EV manufacturer, and now it's planning to roll out these Uber subsidies in Australia, Canada, and New Zealand after introducing them to Europe and Latin America. Western efforts to impose tariffs and anti-dumping measures on Chinese electric vehicle imports have made it pretty hard for BYD and the CCP to succeed in Canada, the US, or Europe. But Australia's another story. It doesn't have a domestic car manufacturing industry that it needs to protect. Or self-respect, apparently, given they're rolling over for China on this while China refuses their rock lobsters. One China expert in Australia warns that if Australia attempts to join other Western countries in these anti-dumping measures and bilateral relations between the two countries deteriorate again, the CCP could retaliate by targeting areas where it can find alternatives to Australian exports. On top of that, Chinese EVs are protected by the Australia-China Free Trade Agreement. And even though there is pressure mounting on Australia to join the green energy revolution through its own domestic industry, it's well behind China in green energy manufacturing. So obviously, the smartest course of action here isn't to invest in your own nation's productivity and self-reliance. It's to become completely dependent on an authoritarian nation that could start World War III at any moment. Looks like in Australia, the water and logic spin counterclockwise down the toilet. Meanwhile, China and Russia are conducting even more joint naval and air drills this month. The exercises, dubbed Northern United 2024, will take place in the Sea of Japan and the Sea of Okhotsk. China's Ministry of Defense announced the drills and location, but didn't give any specific details or dates. But Japan is understandably concerned, since it has a territorial dispute with Russia over the Kuril Islands. But I'm sure Russia can handle disputes without too much drama. It's not like they're going to jump into a never-ending quagmire or anything. Japan also has a long-standing dispute with China over the Senkaku Islands, which the CCP calls the Diaoyu Islands. And China has recently been violating Japanese waters and airspace, often during joint military exercises with Russia. Find someone that loves you as much as China loves violating other countries' waters and airspace. Both China and Russia are concerned about Japan's close alliance with the West, particularly over tensions in the South China Sea and the war in Ukraine. Recently, Russia even threatened to combine with China should they face a common threat. Of course, both China and Russia deny that their military drills are aimed at any countries in particular, but who really believes that? Now I've got a video I want to show you that you're going to love. But first, this episode is sponsored by Incogni. Whenever you do anything online or use apps on your phone, there are tons of companies that collect your personal data. I'm talking name, social security number, home address, employment history, all sorts of things you might not want to be public knowledge. When I signed up for Incogni in 2022, I discovered there were dozens of data brokers that potentially had my private information without my permission. This was terrifying. So what did I do? I've been getting as many of these companies as possible to delete my data from their systems. And I did it using Incogni, and you can too. Incogni has already gotten my details removed from 291 of these data brokers who've collected my info. And I don't have to do anything after signing up. Incogni just handles it. So get Incogni for yourself and reclaim your own data. Go to incogni.com/uncensored and use the code uncensored to get 60% off an annual Incogni plan. Get your personal data off the market with Incogni. And here's a video I want to show you in my ongoing attempts to hide controversial issues in gaming content to get around YouTube censorship. Here's a video about DEI in the just released Warhammer Space Marine 2 game. Click here to check it out. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.